Hey there, Around the Layout listeners. With advanced previews of upcoming episodes and monthly giveaways, now's the time to become an Operating Crew member. For just $3 a month, you'll get an exclusive membership sticker, your name listed on the Operating Crew roster, and automatic entry into our monthly giveaway drawings. Just as important, your financial support keeps all of our episodes from behind paywalls and free of those annoying car insurance commercials you hear on other podcasts. Joining the Operating Crew is quick and easy. Head to patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. And if you missed that, you'll find a link on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And thank you for being a listener. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. It's time once again to find out what's happening in model railroading. And joining me to do that, the editor of Model Railroad News, Tony Cook. Tony.
Hey, Ray, how's it going? How's your 2024 going so far?
2024 has been a very busy time here at the Around the Layout studio, and in a personal life and everything else, it's just ramping up. So I'm looking forward to a great year. We've got so many cool things happening. And of course, at the end of this month, we have Amherst and just a lot of really cool things happening. So it's been a really good start.
Amherst should have loads of new announcements, but I think we've already been blown away by, the Cocoa Beach RPM. And whoever planned that guy, let's have a hobby show in Florida right after the holidays.
Yeah,
that's good planning. Anybody that was, I'm going to be in Cocoa Beach. I'm like, I'm so sorry for that. I think I was talking to Matthew Dowd at Resource Rails about a couple of things. He said, I'm in Cocoa Beach. I'm like, really? Because he's in the Chicago area, I think. And I said, but you know how beautiful Lake Michigan is with that howling wind coming off it in early January, and you're going to go down to Cocoa Beach, Florida? Oh, come on. But Cocoa Beach, ScaleTrains, I'm still sorting through the various announcements, and that came right on the heels of Shane Wilson's, his New Year's video was a great one. I shared that with a lot of people, say, hey, did you hear about this? And see, they're working on this, and he would be somebody good to talk to, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Why don't we see who's outside the studio door here and then let them slip in here. Shane Wilson, president of ScaleTrains. Look at that. He's right here with us.
There he is.
Shane, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Tony. And you are right. Cocoa Beach, the first weekend of January is pretty awesome. And
Yes.
It's pretty funny, too, because we used to take the very first year we took Paul Ellis, and my wife went with me. And after that, she was like, Paul, there's no reason to spend the airfare and an extra hotel room. I'll just work that show with Shane. We can just save a few dollars. I'm like, well played, dear. Well played.
Very good. That's the spin on it that no one can compete with. Like, this is a money saving move. I'm gonna go ahead and tough it out here and go to Florida in January. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing like skipping out on going outside when it's the negatives that you're talking about there in the Midwest. It takes your breath away versus going to Cocoa Beach.
And you're not that bad in Tennessee, are you, Shane? It's a little better. Of course, you're not that far south. I'm St. Louis, Kansas City level.
Well, it's kind of funny you say that because that we're preparing for probably the worst storm that we've had since we moved to Tennessee almost 10 years ago. They're saying 3 to 6 inches here, but that's really rare. And the great thing is that'll move in on Monday, go into Tuesday, and by Wednesday, it'll all be gone, and our winter's over and done. So I'll take it.
Well, you put in enough years, I know, from being in Northern Illinois like you were for so long that, winter.
Oh, I do. In fact, when we decided to move to Tennessee, I just come back from a World's Greatest Hobby Show in Cleveland, Ohio, and I pulled into the driveway and I had to bury the rental van in the driveway because of the snow that had come down the past day or so, to the point where you had to roll down the window, crawl out, go get a shovel so you could roll the window back up. And then the next morning, I'm shoveling snow, and I took a picture of the thermometer, and it was 30 below zero. And I walked in the house, and I looked at my wife, and I'm like, I am never doing this again. I don't know where we're going, but I'm done.
Yeah, that's the picture you hang up in your house in Tennessee when it gets a little warm. Just look at that picture and remember that and say, that's why we're here.
I always feel bad for my dog this time of year when we're up here. It's like, boy, we could be down in Texas, and I'm so sorry about this. Because the minute I put the leash on him to go outside, he takes 2 steps out on the front porch, and you kind of hear this, and it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, buddy. Quick, come to get her done and get back in.
Oh boy. Well, for all this cold talk, what's been hot has been these announcements from ScaleTrains, and they just seem to be rolling in. And we definitely needed to get you back here, Shane, to talk about all that's happening, because boy, it's just so hard to keep up. You got so much going on.
Well, we've been really blessed. We've had a challenging couple of years in product development. We've made some huge changes in the way we do things, and we're just starting to see some of the fruits of that labor come to being, and it'll get even better over the next couple of years.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what some of these new things you had this video. Let's, I guess, go back and talk about that video Tony was talking about. You made a year-end video. If folks haven't seen it, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were talking about there, and maybe some of the things that have started to come to fruition from it?
Well, we used to do a video every year, and then somewhere along the way we got derailed, and it's probably been 5 or more years. And I like to joke around internally and call it State of the State. And so they actually put that on the video this year. And it's a look back at the previous year and some of the highlights and some of the things that happened. It's kind of great to look back, because when you're working in the day-to-day, sometimes you get mired down. You don't realize the awesome things that have happened, from the new products to the road trip to the shows you've been to the people that work with us. I mean, so it's just good to take that look back and then a look ahead. The thing that drives our industry, people love new product, right? And the new things that are going on. And folks like to kind of have that inside look at what's happening. And this is going to be a really good year. I think 24 is probably going to be one of our best years ever for new products. 25 is going to be a little quieter. And then 26 is going to be another monster. We looked at our business and where we've been, and we're starting to mature. Believe it or not, May will be the 10th year since we started ScaleTrains. Of course, we announced a year and a half after we started the business, but we're almost ready to wrap up our first decade. So a lot of great things happening. And of course, the big buzz with Cocoa Beach, we announced an all new N-scale freight car. That was the finger rack flat. Some people call it the candelabra car, and that's never been done before. Of course, we have that in HO as well. And then we brought back an XMTH 60-foot flat car. And we're finally getting traction on the XMTH line. We'll actually, fingers, toes, and everything else are crossed, that in March we'll finally get a fully functioning, that runs really well, sample of the NWJ. It'll be fully decorated with the passenger cars, and make that announcement hopefully by April. And then more to follow pretty quickly after that. And then the other big buzz, and we knew it would could be controversial, but who knew that we would pull the pin on a grenade with the announcement of the Hypotypical brand. But hey, we got a lot of press out of it the last couple of weeks.
My first question, Shane Mason, that's my assistant editor at Model Road News, he said, make sure you ask Shane where they come up with the name. So that has to be one of the greatest names, because everybody's done these and has different brandings for them to designate them as, this is not prototypical for this tooling, but, et cetera, et cetera. But I agree, the Hypotypical, and me, Ray, and I know Shane. In fact, I think I sent Shane an email halfway through the video of, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I'm already ordering things and you have nothing announced yet. That I absolutely love these. And over the years, I've thought, boy, I'd love to see that big turbine done in this, and this road name would be so awesome. But of course, it's UP only. It'll never happen. So I'm excited about it. But yeah, I love the branding Hypotypical.
It was an evolution. We originally were going to use Fox Valley as kind of a catch-all brand. And we sat down in November and really went through what's Kit Classics going to look like, what's Operator. Don't see any changes coming to Rivet Counter. But it was like, well, we'll just dump everything to Fox Valley. And it's like, that's not really the way to go. After a lot of discussion, we decided that for the most part, Fox Valley will become the brands that we've acquired, especially the XMTH and the Fox Valley product. And so it's like, well, that doesn't work. And then the other thing was, the models are Rivet Counter level models. So they've got all the detail, all the separately applied parts. They've got the lighting functions, from class lights to beacons to ditch lights, whatever it might be. And they have all the sound features. And it's like, well, we need to convey that you're going to get all of the rivet counter features. It's just not quite as realistic and true to the prototype as what rivet counter would be. And the other part of that, quite honestly, is we got to charge a rivet counter price for it because of all that detail. And so it's like, well, what if we came up with a sub brand within rivet counter? And we kicked around a lot of ideas, but the challenge was you had to have something that was all encompassing. So we kicked around like, well, we'll call it fallen flags, and it's past paint schemes on current models. But then it's like, well, what about things that are prototypical paint schemes on very similar models, like the Gunderson 5188 versus the Gunderson 5200 covered hopper? Or what about things like the Whizzer SD40-2 that has some really unique details that we'll never tool? Well, Fallen Flags doesn't really cover that. And we had some other working names. And so one afternoon, Bruce, our operations manager, and I were sitting in a room kind of just brainstorming. And I came up with Hypotypical. And the idea was we were looking for something that had to do with prototypical, because it really is. I mean, even though it might be a fantasy paint scheme, and hypo means below or just underneath. So when you put hypo and prototypical together, it's just under rivet counter, and it's just below rivet counter accuracy. So that's how we came up with the Hypotypical name.
That's very cool. And that's so far the one I think I've gotten the most feedback and questions on, or the wow, this is so cool, is the Heritage 1 BNSF on the Gevo, saying, boy, that looks so cool. And out of that first group, I think what the other question I had was on the Union Pacific one. And I think I did the show with the Zucker brothers, Mike and Jeff. I do that one visit with them each month. And we showed the BNSF and the Union Pacific and talked about those HO and N-scale GEVOs that had just been announced. And the Union Pacific one, I think we were both scratching our heads as to, okay, I guess that's the most current, newest UP paint scheme maybe, and hasn't yet been applied to that GEVO. So that's how again, there is such a realism factor there that you do have to stop and go, okay, why is that not right?
Yeah. And that was part of it too. This idea has been kicked around for a long time, and it's something we've wanted to do, but we've never wanted to tarnish the rivet counter brand. We want people to know, and I think this is really important for folks to hear, rivet counter is going to be rivet counter. It is going to be prototypically accurate. So you don't have to worry. But when it has a Hypotypical on it, there's something that's not quite to the level that could be. Now, of course, when we're talking about applying past paint schemes from BNSF on an ET44, that had never happened before. Or you're talking about the latest UP paint scheme and putting it on an ET44. And we got some folks say, well, why don't you do more road numbers on the ET44? Well, for the folks that don't know, that's GE's latest locomotive. And the thing about it is we've done 8 production runs, and we've done every imaginable prototype paint scheme and adding the road numbers to it. And what we found is the sales are starting to wane. There's a lot in the marketplace at this point. And it's like, well, how can we extend the life of that tooling? Because tooling's crazy expensive. The locomotive we're going to announce here at the end of the month in HO, we have $300,000 invested in this first production run. That's a ton of money. And you want to wring that out, right? You want to make as much as you possibly can. So if the prototype paint schemes are starting to wane, well, what if we try some things in the Hypotypical line and see if we can get a little longer life out of it? And that could stretch us to another production run here in 2 or 3 years, where we come back with prototypical road names and paint schemes and road numbers. So it's kind of that bridge to the next production run, and it keeps the cash flowing. And, if we hit pretty decent, the number that we think we will, and we're on track to do that, it'll be a nice pop of cash. It'll obviously carry our company for a month's worth of operating expenses and have some money left over to invest in some other things.
I think that's one thing that we learned when we talked to you last time on the show here was the things that we forget as hobbyists. This is a hobby for all of us, but it's a business too, and you got to make business-like decisions. And I think it's easy to forget that as what you enjoy becomes part of this. Those decisions have to be made, and it's a process. And I was just blown away when you told me, 5 to 6 years from thought to warehouse shelf is just that's a long time, and a lot of things that go into building a model.
Yeah, and that's another important point too, Ray. We got a lot of flack about, well, gosh, you got this SD40-2 tooling, and you've got the tunnel motor tooling, and this are SD45s, and they haven't been ran. The S45s haven't been ran in a while. Well, there's a time and a place for everything. Our production schedule is all the way out through January of 2026, with things on the board beyond 2026. And there are unannounced runs of GP30s and SD45s and 40-2s and tunnel motors and ES44s and go on that are on that schedule. It's just that we had a slot open up for a locomotive, both in HO and N. And it's like, well, what are we going to fill that slot with? And it was a very short window. And the quickest thing we could do is come up with something like Hypotypical to fill that slot. Now we're starting to plan more products down the road for the brand, but it fills a production slot, keeps the cash flowing, and folks can rest assured, two things can be true at once, right? We can have Hypotypical products and still develop all new models.
I'm waiting for that call. Actually, I'm not waiting for the call on the extra help on what to do on the Hypotypical, because I'm already sending him emails saying, oh, I'd like to see this. Oh, I'd like to see that. But that's the thing. I get some of the outrage from modelers that, oh my gosh, you still haven't done every road number or this, but it amazes me they can't quite see over that fence but the reality is, if you did keep basically going back and doing just more BNSF, more Union Pacific of the same look, same, as you say, the kind of that law of diminishing returns comes into where, boy, we've saturated the market.
Yep.
And people like myself that do enjoy that collecting side of things, that get excited for seeing fantasy schemes or what ifs, or this is almost, like that BNSF Heritage one. Those are dollars that, I'm never going to buy your sixth run of a BNSF wedge paint scheme. It's like, I probably have one on the shelf. I have one. That's cool. It's great. But this brings me into a market that otherwise would be like, well, yeah, there's really nothing that I would pick up out of that group. So I really like it. And what you did on the first ones, as I say, they're really serious. I think the negativity that I think creeps into the take that people have, and it's not just ScaleTrains, and everybody, all companies anymore, you almost have to look for those that don't produce some of the fantasy line models. And everyone tells me the same thing. These sell and sell like crazy. So I'm not the only one out there scooping up, Rio Grande Jeep 15s from Athearn or Missouri Pacific Sharks from Broadway Limited. They are popular. I think that the thing that sticks in people's minds, and it goes back to something that's near and dear to me, are the toyish train set models that we had as kids.
Yep.
I think when you hear and see that, why those modelers see red is they immediately are picturing that red and silver war bonded Tyco Century 630, it's in chrome and red, or a chassis system, like, and I think that this is a far cry, what you're doing in this first Hypotypical line, from any of those kind of toyish releases. But that at least has been kind of my thought, is the minute that is seen or heard, they think of some train set with a Union Pacific F40. And it's like, whoa.
Well, and to put this in perspective for people, I'm going to go back to my Athearn days. And when NS announced the Heritage program, and our guys went to, back then, went to, of course, Spencer, and took all the photos, and they come back, and it's a long way from starting a model to bringing it to market. And I'm like, so let's, we've done some AC 4400s with some fantasy paint schemes, chassis system and that kind of thing. I said, what if we take the Heritage schemes, we put them on AC 4400s, we're going to beat everybody to market because we can do it pretty quickly. Yeah, it's not prototypical, but we'll make a few bucks and we'll plow that money into something else. Those 10 locomotives were one of the best-selling products in Athearn's history for a production run. It was unbelievable how many we sold. I can't think of a new product either from ScaleTrains or Athearn on a first run that's ever sold as many as those did. And I don't see like this run doing that for the ET44, but it put a lot of money in the bank for Athearn that helped them invest in other things.
And helps make those rivet counters and other the things that people are, well, why don't you do this instead of going off down this path?
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's what's going to fund that.
And
As I say, boy, I can't get enough of the stuff as a collector, both real and fantasy. I like them both. So, I was excited by the news.
Yeah. And that's a great point too, Tony. You take the SDL 39, we're going to get probably 2 runs out of it, and it's going to have to rest for years.
Mm-hmm.
And the SD 45X, we'll get 2 runs out of that, and it's going to have to rest for years. There's a lot of time, tremendous amount of time and money that goes into those 2 projects. And to do something for 2 years and then let it rest for several years, financially, if you were outside our industry, you'd look at that and go, you guys are crazy. Why would you ever do that? But we also know that people like to get the unique projects, and that's why we're willing to do some things that won't make us really money over the long pull. We'll make money on the project, but it's not an ET44 where we're on the 9th run in 8 years.
So what I'm hearing is this Hypotypical really becomes kind of a feeder program for some of those special projects you're able to do.
Mm-hmm. And it also, and we kind of touched on it a little earlier, but it's interesting. You look at the eras of product, right? You got transition era 40s, 50s, that's 2 decades. Then you go to the 60s and 70s, that's 2 decades. 80s and 90s is 2 decades. I'm sorry, 70s and 80s is 2 decades. And then you go from 90s to today, that's 4 decades. Well, the 90s today is really the modern modeler. Well, we've got ES44s, ET44s, AC4400s, -9s, more new stuff that fits that pipeline time frame. And you can only go to that customer every so often. And so you have to have things like in those blocks of eras so that you can keep your cash flowing. Well, by having Hypotypical, we can have a month where, maybe it is a modern locomotive with the ET44. And as Tony says, it might not appeal to a guy who is ultra modern and very focused on being prototypically accurate. But some other guy might go, and I like that paint scheme. I like that railroad. I'm going to go ahead and buy that. So that provides cash for a month, in that month, because our goal is to land a locomotive every month, be it in HO or and then in a variety of eras, because it requires that. The one thing I don't think you talk about business, people don't really realize our operating expenses blow me away. Well, how much it takes every month to run this company. It is in the multi 6 figures just for the operating expenses. And that doesn't include your tooling costs, your deco tooling costs, buying decoders to go in locomotives. So you've got to have things that you could have in your pipeline to pay the bills. Between our 2 companies now, we have 29 employees, and there's 29 employees and their families that are counting on us to put food on the table, a roof over their head, and to be able to make a decent living and enjoy life. And I think that's the part, we as modelers can be really passionate about what we love and what we want. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and we have to make money to be here today, tomorrow, and 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah, for sure. Again, going back to for remembering it's a business within the hobby and the things that you have to support. And none of this is, I can promise you that Shane's not sitting in a room full of money. Doesn't look like Scrooge McDuck swimming around, kind of thing.
I wish that was true.
Don't we all? But it's about that. It's about keeping people employed. It's about supplying to the hobby. And but we talk about getting young kids into the hobby, and this is the stuff they recognize, this newer stuff, the ETs, and that's what they're attracted to, the new modern locomotives. So it's great that you're producing these, and it's important that continues to happen.
And I think too, and boy, I hope that folks don't take this the wrong way, but I hear this all the time, right? Boy, the curmudgeons say how the hobby's dying and younger people aren't interested. And I got to tell you, if I was someone that was a newcomer or just, enjoyed the hobby, but wasn't a super serious modeler, and I read some of the vitriol the last couple of weeks, I'd be like, do I really want to be in a hobby where I'm being belittled, and should I continue to participate? And the great thing about our hobby is it's like, folks, there's so many different facets of what is, Tony likes to collect. I like to operate. Some folks like to build a railroad, whether that's bench work or wiring or scenery or whatever it is. We have a million different facets of this hobby. Enjoy the one that appeals to you most. And if something doesn't, that's okay. Support the folks that do, because
Yes.
in the end, who wants to be belittled and put down? Nobody does. Let's be positive and encourage people.
Exactly, and it benefits everyone.
That's right.
As we stated, that again, these things get tooled up, get made for the prototypical, like the SDL39 is another great example, as you mentioned. When that came out, my dad, we talked about it. He was thrilled about it. In fact, I bought him one of those as a Christmas present that year. And he's like, I can't believe this exists. This is so cool. He said, the sad thing is, it's all going to be, it's basically Milwaukee Road. He said, I'd love to see these in some of the other, roads that potentially could have bought them for the reason Milwaukee bought them. I said, oh, that would be neat. He said, did they do an undecorated? I said, no, undecorated is not in the group. And I had emails from various people saying, hey, would they do an undecorated SDL 39 or, something in like a primer or other things? So again, that interest, that's one of those immediate things you think of is I love the Milwaukees, and like myself, I've got the couple of different Milwaukee paint schemes with the billboard lettering. And so I love them both. But it would be crazy neat to see Rock Island or Chicago Northwestern or, something else in that, a Montana rail link or something wild. Like, well, yeah, I know they didn't, but isn't that cool? That, again, I think that, and as you say, that SDL 39, a couple of runs and you've knocked on every Milwaukee fan's door and they've bought 2. So do they need 3? It's like, well, so what do you do? And you've got this tooling that you've invested in, and it's like, well, it needs to sit for quite a while till we build up that interest again. Whereas again, a fantasy run of those in, various roads is suddenly, well, now we've appealed to the D&H modeler by doing one in gray and blue, and they think that's really all, So I get it. I get both sides, but I certainly lean on the side of, oh, please give me more. But it's awesome stuff to see. And again, the dollar signs prove it. As I say, I told you that in that email I first sent you when you announced. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've had Athearn, Broadway. Broadway said the same thing. Oh, we were told, make sure it's got to be absolutely correct. And so we stayed away from them forever, and then started doing some fantasy schemes, and we're like, wow, those SKUs are out the door. And there you go. I mean, the money talks in any business.
That's right.
Sometimes you see what you want to see. I think Tony got really excited about Hypotypical because if you look at it fast, it kind of looks like Tycho in the beginning. Like it's got the Y, it's got the O, the shape, the black. I think Tony got excited when he saw Tycho and he thought something really big was happening with ScaleTrains with Tycho. But no, Hypotypical is a really cool line. And it really lines up to me this whole theory of what's I found to be a pretty hot trend in the hobby too, which is the freelance. I mean, we talk about what Chris Palmieri has done with home shops and all the roads and covering all these freelance. And although you're doing prototypical roads, that's still that fantasy idea has just been really hot lately. And I think it's going to be something that folks are going to adapt to and really be attracted to the big what if. And I think that's a lot of fun to do.
Well, I know this show's going to be out just before. Amherst is always big every year, but I know you can't tell us. But in announcements, I know that there's an HO scale 4-axle diesel. Tell us what give us numbers. Do we have 1 in scale, 2 HO announcements? What can we be whetting our appetites for from Amherst at the end of the month?
Oh, here's my prediction. The numbers he's going to give you is 4 because he's going to tell you it's 4-axle. That's good. That's what he's going to tell us. But go ahead, Shane.
I'll give you a few more numbers. We're actually really excited about Springfield. So this year, our booth space is going to expand from 20 by 20 to 20 by 40. We're welcoming Virtual Railfan into our booth. So ScaleTrains will occupy about 20 by 30 and VR will be about 10 by 20. And we're going to launch the future of Virtual Railfan. For your folks that don't know what Virtual Railfan is, that's live streaming real trains. And we're in over 60 locations with a ton more coming. We're actually working on our video on demand service where you can watch videos from the past, like back from the 1980s. And we'll have a lot more to share from Virtual Railfan there at the show. Pretty excited about that piece of it. And then, and our booths are actually connected. It's going to be kind of neat. You'll see a red border around the ScaleTrain side and an orange border around the VR side. So that's one thing that's happening. And then it's pretty cool. I had a chance last week on the way to Cocoa Beach to had the inside track with CSX here recently on the Heritage program. We'll announce the first 5 Heritage units. We're working with a company called Jointed Rail. They do gaming, and we should have renders of all of those ready to go for the show, with samples to come probably in March or April. And boy, I'll tell you what, the renders that we've been playing with look unbelievable. So we'll be able to unveil that. And it was really cool too, a little bit of, if you want some inside, we got to see the next locomotive that's in the shops right now. And I got to tell you, the folks that have been negative on the program, some folks like the fact that, CSX in the front, predecessor railroad at the back. Some people don't. But I'll tell you, CSX is really dedicating a lot of resources. They don't have a sandblasting facility in Waycross. They are literally grinding every locomotive, and there's like 5 or 6 full-time guys that are doing one locomotive at a time for this program.
Wow.
So, from here forward, this is awesome. So from here forward, we have supplied the paint codes to CSX for the next units that are coming. And so someday when someone says that's not the right color, he'll be like, actually, we supplied that color, so I know it's right.
Awesome.
And we've actually been supplying artwork. So there was some concerns like the New York Central unit that just came out with the Herald, and so the next couple, we've actually supplied what the art's going to be on the side of the locomotive. So we'll know that art's right too.
Awesome.
Man,
so we got that coming up.
That is the way to do it. It's like, what do you mean it's wrong? We did it. We did the prototype.
Yeah, we gave them the information.
That.
So it's been awesome to work with CSX on that. And that's you want to talk about something that's going to put money in the bank for us. Holy smokes, the things that'll do once we start shipping those locomotives, it'll be unbelievable. And then we'll have the next Exact Rail announcement. Will be the first one we actually take pre-orders on, and we'll have samples at the show. It's something that's been out in the past, but now we'll actually be able to more predict what's needed. Because like the most recent rail box cars came in, boy, we had that one with it was kind of a patched version with I can't think what you call it, on the roof where they seal the seams, sealant, and it was gone instantly. So now we'll be able to judge that a little bit better. And then, of course, what everybody wants to know is what's new. We'll have an all-new in-scale freight car, and it has a feature that's never been done before, which is really cool. And then we've got an all-new in-scale locomotive with some pretty amazing lighting features. And then we will have, as Ray alluded to, our next all-new HO 4-axle locomotive. And we'll make all those announcements live at the show at 10 a.m. We'll do a live stream. VR's actually got a dedicated hardline this year, so we won't have to worry about sharing the internet and having a connection that might not be as strong. And then all the email will go out at 10:30 on that morning. So a lot of great stuff. And then looking later in the year, N-Scale will get its first 4-axle locomotive announcement at the N-Scale convention in Pennsylvania in June. I would fingers and toes are crossed for one more HO locomotive this year, possibly 2. Not sure yet, a little early in the year. And then, of course, a few more new freight cars on top of it. I'll tell you what, when we acquired Exact Rail last year, we got a fantastic product developer in Chris Brimley, and he is absolutely going to town on new product. He's already totally overhauled one project that we've announced that had some real inaccuracies in it. And now it's right. He's actually got 2 all new freight cars that he's done already. And Chris is working on his first locomotive and about ready to send that over to be engineered. That one's still going to be probably a year or 2 away, but before we can announce it. But and then a lot of good things. So I think I'm looking forward to an exciting 2024, and I think, after this year, it's going to be, I think 25 might be a little bit of a letdown. We don't have as much in the pipeline for 25, but then again in 26, it'll be another strong year.
Don't you like that, Ray? Can you believe that? Do you know what you're doing in 2026, Ray?
No, I don't know what I'm doing, 3 weeks from now. So, I mean, I got to figure out how ScaleTrains plans things out and take a page out of their book because
they've always been that way. I remember as they launched, which I can't believe that's 10 years ago, Shane, that
launch would be 9 years. 9. Yeah. Yeah, because we worked for a year and a
That,
half behind the scenes.
that was such an amazing event. That was at Train Fest, right? And they had a little, it was at I think a Mexican restaurant there in Wisconsin,
El
where
Fuego.
Train Fest is. Yes. And it was just amazing to see for the first time. They had like the museum quality, that huge box with the little magnifying glass and everything for the, the UP turbine. And wow, that just seems like it was yesterday to me, probably to you too, Shane. I can't believe that.
Oh, it feels like a lifetime ago now.
Well, in a way, yeah. In a way, it's like, oh, ScaleTrains has always been around. And it's like, well, no, not really. But yeah, that's incredible. So awesome stuff. Well, I think there's more than enough happening there I'm going to have to keep mowing yards, I think, all this summer to have extra money to buy trains, but that's fine.
That's awesome. And I'm looking forward to seeing Shane in Amherst. He mentioned he'll be there. We'll be there as well. And we're going to be giving away a ScaleTrains locomotive over at the Around the Layout podcast table. That will be in the Young Building 89D. And we're giving away a GE ES44 AC locomotive. This is the Norfolk Southern Conrail Heritage Unit that ScaleTrains has been so kind to provide to us. We'll be giving that away. You come over to the booth, show us that you're subscribed to the podcast. We'll give you an entry to win, and we'll draw that on Sunday. And we'll do a live. We'll steal some of that bandwidth away from some other folks. And Heath Hurwitz from Humanity Junction, I've already been talking about how much bandwidth he's going to be stealing. There's so many people going around streaming, but we'll get online. We'll give that away. And we thank ScaleTrains for their generosity and supporting our giveaway, and looking forward to that big event up in West Springfield. That's where I'll see you next.
We're happy to do that for you, Ray. You do an awesome service for our hobby. Really appreciate all you do to share what all we love.
Well, Tony, another awesome visit from Shane at ScaleTrains, the company that just seems to just churn out locomotives like crazy.
I always like to, and Shane's really good at that when I've talked to him, because you always expect everybody to be so tight-lipped, we can't tell you about this. And while there were not specifics, boy, he shared a lot of fun stuff with us. We know Amherst has got, an in-scale locomotive with or this year in general between Amherst and coming up. He talked about, we have that 4-axle HO locomotive, the new in-scale locomotive with lighting features that hadn't been seen before, freight cars. So again, not knowing specifics, but just knowing those kind of things is a fun, wow, I wonder what that's going to, those are those things that, when it's like, okay, I've been working all day, I've got to, get to sleep, lay down. And the minute my head hits a pillow, it's like, wonder what those lighting features and what 4-axle locomotive would that be? Yeah.
Yeah. Or what are they going to do with an N-scale freight car that's never been done before?
I know.
It's like, well, what could that possibly be? So it's going to be a lot of fun to see what's coming out of there. That's going to keep you and your staff plenty busy during 2024. But that wasn't already a problem because, boy, you got a whole list here again for me for this show. So you tell me what's happening in model railroading, Tony.
Well, we've got to round up a lot of this stuff are things that are delivering. So not always, we talk a lot about stuff that have just been announced, and we do have some future things, but shipping as we speak this week is the first run of Broadway Limited imports HO scale GP30 diesel locomotives. And this is right on the heels of their GP35, which was a first run for them in HO. Road specific features, the whole shoot and match, they come DCC sound with their Paragon 4. Electronics are also in stealth. The March 2024 cover story on Model Railroad News are the Jeep 35s with a as-delivered red Burlington, and then that heavily rebuilt and modified modern BNSF Jeep 35 are on the cover. So Broadway's just been red hot with these like mid-60s, which they hung around forever, being EMDs, diesel locomotives. But the 30s are arriving now. And also new, and I haven't seen it yet, they're on their way from Bachmann, that Missouri Pacific caboose. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but that's I think the Sedalia shops of the Mopac built those cabooses, and it looks kind of like a transfer caboose. And I think Bachmann is labeling it, a bit as such, but it was a lot of the pictures I have, they're out on the road. So it's a bit of both. They did do the Missouri Pacific, and they did like Union Pacific, CSX SP of kind of transfer schemes. But that's a new HO caboose from Bachmann. in scale from Bachmann, and this one slipped past me. Our friend Matt Stern over there said, hey, did you know the new run of in scale gondolas is out, and ask about samples on those. And I thought, well, aren't they just road names? And he said, no, that 52-foot 6-inch kind of Milgon, the in scale version of this latest run, has working drop ins. So you can push the ends down and carry like oversized like pipe loads and things. And I didn't know that.
Wow, very cool.
There's a handful of road names for it. I really like the Great Northern with the matching red trucks to the red body, and the Frisco in kind of a mineral red I thought was really nice. But those are that car in general has been available, but this with the working drop-ins is a new modification, and that's an in-scale from Bachmann. Also this week we got to see, I forget when, maybe it was the NTS show in last August in Dallas. Bachmann announced a SD40-2 was returning to their in-scale line and would be all new tooling. And they shared images of those. I think 4 road names were shown on that. And all 3 of these Bachmann items, the SD40-2s, at least when I looked as we're recording this show a day or so before it hits going online, I don't think those were on Bachmann's website yet. The gondolas and that Mopac caboose is, but you can go to Bachmann's Facebook, or I'm sure I probably shared it over on Model Train Resource or Model Railroad News' Facebook, and you can see the shots of those new SD40-2s from Bachmann. And that's such a popular prototype anyway, that's one of those, the market I think is almost never satisfied no matter how many versions get made in whatever scale, that there's always room for another SD40-2.
Absolutely.
And the folks over at Cato have been very busy with Amtrak stuff. You know, they're doing that early Rainbow era consist with some Penn Central and early Amtrak Phase 1 passenger cars, and the E-units are landing with the red-nosed Phase 1s, and then that cool 4316, the day one, is coming out in scale from Cato. And then Cato also just delivered the contemporary ALC 42s, a new run of those in, it's that current, it's not, I don't think, one of the special paints. It's that new Amtrak paint with kind of the reddish front and the dark blue back, and really nice looking, but tons of Amtrak in scale from Cato out now or delivering here in the next month or so. I think the E-units are not quite out, but the Chargers are on those. Nice to see so much in scale. I hear that at times I get, hey, what about in scale? And certainly has been a lot of in scale open in the year. Vehicle stuff, I love collecting cars, and I collect cars in all different scales, the 125th kits and 164th diecast and all that. But HO cars especially are always fun to see new ones. And my friend Rick that handles Oxford Diecast's U.S. North American distribution has a number of new cars he was telling me about this week. There's a first Oldsmobile 88, and then their 59, I think it is, Plymouth Fury is in a Oklahoma State Trooper scheme.
Right.
And then the first release of a 1958 two-door Chevy Impala is hitting. But the one that really excited me was that 1966 Pontiac GTO, and it's coming out in red and blue. And I think what's interesting about those is, in general, the selections from Oxford, and these are such neat, I think these are priced like below $15 for fully assembled in the little clear case, display case. I mean, they're a killer value in the hobby today. But these little HO vehicles, in general, they've really aimed at kind of that transition era, we're talking railroads of like 1950s and maybe just into the 1960s. So seeing the 66 GTO, and I think they have a late 60s Mopar muscle car coming. So it's nice to see some kind of later prototypes coming to those, because both at the price and the quality of these Oxford diecast models, they're excellent for, parking lots, auto racks, and everything else. And they usually always land in a couple of different colors, like that GTO, as I mentioned, is a metallic blue, and then there's kind of a red flavor as well. So definitely ones to look for and keep an eye out for. Walther's kind of surprised me this week that their announcements had a new run for Proto FP7s in combo sets with the FP7 and then like an F7B unit, and then their 40-foot mainline modernized boxcar and their 50-foot General Steel piggyback flat car. That's always a fun model. Now, there's nothing surprising in what I just said. What surprised me is the boxcar and the piggyback flat car. They were announced like midweek, and they're available. They're in stock now. So that is not usually typical of Walthers. And a heads up to collectors and those looking for interesting road names. In that mainline 40-foot modernized boxcar, there is a brown UPS, and UPS stuff is always very collectible. And there's a really neat white Lindy gas. You think of those as being green cars, but that white, I think, is also a prototypical look for that car. I think it should be neat. And there's several other, regular, like Burlington, UP, Santa Fe, but real collector alert or heads up that since it landed in hobby shops and such, probably didn't have a chance to take pre-orders and get ahead of it. Those UPS 40-foot boxcars, they come in 3 numbers, probably will evaporate quickly.
Tom Petty once said, waiting's the hardest part. Well, you don't have to wait for these. That's pretty cool. Announcement. And by the way, they're available.
They're available. And I've asked, I don't have a response yet from Walthers, but I asked about that saying, did this just was kind of a one-time thing? Or are we going to start seeing more of that in there? Walthers does a monthly announcement, and they put out a really great video where they talk through the announcements and tell you what's coming out and what's different, what's new about them. That's on Walthers' YouTube channel. And as I say, I haven't gotten a response yet on how or why those 2 mainline releases both got announced and were available, but that we'll see if that becomes a more standard thing. It is standard for Tangent, and I can't believe it. He did that Clinchfield, that Eastern prototype Bethlehem coal hopper, and I did that video with him talking about it. And then the Illinois Central Gulf Centralia Shops 3834 cubic foot coal hopper, which looks similar to the Clinchfield Eastern one, but these were assembled by IC's own road shops. He brought that out and even did they had orange toppers to turn them into covered hoppers to carry like grain products.
Oh, wow.
I believe, in addition to, so they could do coal and grain, which I remember as a little kid when those hit in like the mid 70s, and I'd have been about 8 or 10 years old. I remember asking my dad, well, how can they do that if they carried coal on one trip and then they're carrying grain and that makes bread? Like, how does that work? He said, well, that's how they make rye bread. I don't think that's accurate. I think I was being fooled. And there's
you still believe that it might be true?
Well, and I do eat a lot of rye bread, so I'm getting enough anthracite in my diet, I guess.
So.
But anyhow, I think that was just fooling a poor 8-year-old when I think it was in Trains magazine. There was a picture of that saying that IC had developed those orange toppers for coal cars to make multi-uses. And that's typical now too. I think, what is that? I forget what they call them, but there's aluminum, modern coal hoppers like on BNSF, and our buddy Mac Rail down in Texas has made those lids for,
right.
It looks like kind of a canvasy thing, and he molds it in plastic. They're really nice looking. In fact, I had one of those sets of cars that he takes out at shows, and I did a review of one of those recently. But so that is something that happens. And no, I don't think it makes rye or wheat bread or anything, but I'll look into that. Maybe it's pumpernickel. I don't eat pumpernickel. I don't know. So, but we'll find out. But anyhow, that ICG Centralia Shops hopper landed. I was so excited. I called David. I said, hey, would you like to do a quick video talking about those? Nope, they're sold out. I said, what? Wow. They're sold out? And I had a couple other people email me saying, hey, wasn't this just enough? How is it sold out? Because David had talked recently about how, production runs are bigger on most cars, and he's bringing out monthly releases now. So the stuff doesn't disappear as fast as it once did 10 years ago when there weren't as many releases coming out of Tangent. So I was a little surprised. He said, no. I said, I don't have any samples for review. And he said, I really wouldn't want them reviewed anyway. They're gone. But luckily the Zuckers up at Spring Creek saved my bacon and had an IC and an ICG, and the lids come in a group of 3 for like $42, and have got etched metal. It basically looks like the top of a covered hopper, and it's just a little piece that sits, the whole thing fits on the coal hopper. But I got a set of those coming from them. But yeah, wow. The one thing to get out of David at Tangent is he will be making more, but boy, if you want them, they're gone from Tangent scale models. I think the Zuckers at Spring Creek model trains in Nebraska said they were about out. I did see that Lombard in the Chicago area, Lombard Hobbies, had some. So some of the tangent dealers, and I would guess Redboard Hobbies in Belleville, Illinois, in the St. Louis area, I think he carries a good bunch of tangents. So if you're looking and trying to get them, there's 3 shots for you to try to grab from that first run. But it's a really neat looking car with the big eyeball herald for ICG and the big white billboard Illinois Central or Illinois Central Gulf lettering. So I'm eager to see them.
Cars that are harder to get than Taylor Swift tickets.
I guess, although I don't know that I've been. Is Taylor Swift, is she country or pop? Being in the Kansas City area quite a bit of the time, obviously we were bombarded with the whole Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift thing. And I'm glad that we've been able to work that now into your podcast, that
it's infiltrated. It's around me. I swear, with my girls. In the
okay.
house,
there's where you get it. Okay.
Yeah,
I was going to say,
I've been indoctrinated with it. So,
all right. So but this is probably the last podcast on earth that is yet to gone on the Swiftie path. But so is the music, do you hear it when you're growing? Is it country? Yeah. Is it pop? Is it, because I don't know. Just to me,
it's like proto freelance country, right? Or proto freelance pop. I don't know what it is.
So let's see, something that I would know. Is it kind of like Olivia Newton-John stuff of the 70s that was kind of a little country-ish at first, but also pop before she went like to, the big hit Physical album in 80, or am I too old now for you?
You're within my time.
Okay.
I go back anyway. I listen to music that's kind of just before me anyway.
Okay.
I tried so hard to indoctrinate Van Halen into my daughters, but it has not worked.
Wow.
No,
okay.
It hasn't taken so far, but we'll keep working on that.
Well, there you go. Speaking of big, huge, and popular, Marklin is doing a big boy in number 1 or G scale.
Whoa.
Exactly. And you can, if you go to YouTube, you can find, and it's in German, but there's an English version of the Marklin kind of runs down their 2024 announcements of new products coming in various scales. And towards the end of that video, they talk about and show both a painted sample, and they show you it's made out of like aluminum and zinc castings with brass. And I think they state they made a lot of the parts that might have been die-cast metal, like boiler and other things, they made out of aluminum for this G-scale big boy, just because you literally almost wouldn't be able to pick the model up if they'd done it, in die-cast. So to try to make it a little easier to wrangle, some of it is aluminum. But I cannot imagine, and I think I saw, and I meant to do the calculator, I think its price is like 6,900 euros or something. I don't, but yeah.
What is that mark? Yeah, I'm not sure what that means. 6990.
Yeah, I'm
00.
Sure. And
is that marks? Maybe.
So it'll make it. I assume we'll make it over here. And I forget now if the Marklin and Marklin and LGB are kind of connected. And I had talked to the Stacy and Gail Cousins that are the U.S. distributors here from Marklin LGB. And, they've been real busy because that catalog and everything just landed this week. But eager to see more on this. I can't imagine just what wow, a G-scale big boy. That's
34 pounds, 6 ounces.
There you get. It's also a workout. that could be your workout routine, is you pick that big boy up 10 times a day. But wow, Isn't that something? So exciting news there, and big scale stuff. Touching back on ScaleTrains, we talked with Shane Wilson, and there's so much hitting, but I wanted to mention, he talked about that new in-scale flat car, which is a finger rack flat car, as it's called. And if you go on ScaleTrains website and look for it, it's an F68BH. It's a Bethlehem steel prototype from the late 1960s, and you can see illustrations for it. This is a first-time release coming to in-scale, and then HO got the Thrall high cubes that are coming out as rivet counters and operators that were announced in August at the National Train Show. They've added a new run that will be the more modernized, although when you say that, it seems like there's a big division between the older style and the new. The first run for rivet counter had roof walks and high brakes and tall ladders, but for these high cubes, they literally land about 1964, and by 65-6, that rule with railroads went away on the running boards. So that's a very small contingent of those big 86-foot auto-carrying cars. But they did do those first, which is neat because, again, that's a rarely done model for a high cube. And they have now announced a new run of Thrall two-doors that'll be the more modern with the low brake wheel, no running boards up top, and a lot of great road names. There's like 3 different looks for a mineral red Conrail with different, sizes of the can opener or the Conrail lettering. Santa Fe, that beautiful Union Pacific with the automated railway map on the side. And Chris Brimley is working on that project for ScaleTrains, I've heard, and I'm going to be talking with him on the modifications for the first run and talking about this new second run that was announced. And I'll have a little short video on my Model Train Research YouTube channel. The deadline on those is February 5th to pre-order them. So I'll have that video out well ahead of that so you can kind of catch some extra detail on what's happening with basically 3 different models there, because you got an operator and rivet counter already announced and the second run rivet counter of the modernized version. So I'll try to add a little info when I get a chance to sit down with Chris.
Chris has been so busy. I wonder if he's even had a chance to get the camera out, because he's a phenomenal photographer as well.
Yeah.
And I love seeing his stuff. So very cool to see what he starts taking there in Tennessee. In between designing all these great models.
He's still been doing, I follow him on Facebook, and that's always one of the fun things to see what he shot kind of in the Utah area. And I've been seeing some rail fanning stuff, so he's still getting in the time, which is awesome.
Excellent.
Rapido, our last show, I told everybody heads up to be watching for the Rapido holiday announcement of what was going to be, always a big surprise thing from them. And the HO was the first F unit, the FT, coming in the AB pair as they came from General Motors. Various road accurate features to those. This will be a really interesting model to see because while we've had FTs on the market, I think the first plastic is a very poorly done Yugoslavian made one from American Train and Track about 1968 that you almost have to be told, oh, by the way, that's an FT. It's like, oh, is it? Like, okay, yeah, I guess I see that. But that's a very train setty model. And then AHM had the next FT in 1974 made by Cater, and it later went, it's the Bachmann model. And it's a good, it's an FT, an HO plastic. And then Stewart Hobbies and Intermountain have done FTs, but Rapido's going to do the Rapido treatment. And they're already showing close coupling, again, road specific details all around, the piping underneath around the trucks, ground lights over the lead truck. This should be the FT in HO scale, has just been announced from Rapido as part of their end of the year. And I was kind of surprised it went as conditional because I had heard this asked for several times. But in N-Scale, they've announced a Bud RDC1 in a couple of different phases. The early phases on those, it's the light over the access door on the ends. One has kind of a hood and the light is up over the ridge of the nose, more or less. And the other has the light placed down in the nose above the door. I think that's the big demarcation between phase 1, phase 2 of Bud RDC1s. They've announced that it is a conditional announcement. So they're wanting to see, is the interest there to go ahead and produce it? I'll be surprised if there isn't the interest. That one will surprise me if it doesn't get a green light, because I'm sure you've seen that too. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, I wish, when they did that beautiful RDC, and they've done a bunch of different versions in HO, again, that was the cry, what about N-Scale? So I'm eager to see.
N-Scale, like you mentioned before, is getting a lot of love from these manufacturers, and the popularity and it's again cool to see just how far advanced N-Scale can get, and just amazing as technology seems to shrink down into smaller formats, all that much better for N-Scale.
I'm eager to see. Like I say, we'll see what happens with that, but you can find out more at rapidotrains.com and see on that Bud announcement as well as the FTs. And finally, catalogs. This early part of the year is always an annual catalog time because the New York Toy Show used to always be huge for the like Lionel's and American Flyer and Tyco, and those folks would show their products that would be the Christmas sets for later that year. And that remains traditional catalog time. Bachmann is working on its annual catalog. Marklin, as we mentioned, has their stuff out in a new catalog. Pico America has got new catalogs for HO and G Scale. And Lionel just landed with their 2024 Volume 1 catalog that largely it features O, and I think there's a little bit of S, and they do show a couple Polar Express HO items, all kinds of neat things. The Wild Triplex steam locomotive is in there in O. There's some great Jeeps. They're doing a Jeep 9B is a new tooling for their Scale O Jeep 9, and then they have several Jeep 9 road names to go with it. Lots of licensed items, the Polar Express, as I mentioned, Looney Tunes, Anheuser-Busch. So lots of fun collectibles there. And but whether that's your thing or not, that Lionel catalog, I always am excited to see it land, just to page through it and ooh and ah at all the big 3-rail O-gauge trains from Lionel.
I love that the digital version is like a paging through. You click through and it has that turning page effect to it. So it really does give that good feel of thumbing through the pages without physically thumbing.
Without doing it, yeah. And I think they do. That is print. You will find that at Lionel dealers, and I think you can request a copy. And as they mentioned on the video that Ryan and his crew, Ryan Kunkel, did earlier this week or last week on the announcement and showing the catalog, the HO line is getting a new boxcar that's just landing. There's a gondola. There's a couple of new HO freight cars. More HO announcements are due later this year, and we'll watch with anticipation on some of that, because it's always great to see that historic and big name on its HO line.
Wow, just more and more stuff coming out. It's just amazing.
Yeah, there's not a thing. There's no reason to go to your hobby shop this week or go online or no. This is the week to binge watch Seinfeld again or Curb Your Enthusiasm or something. There's nothing to interest you in the hobby right now.
And now it's time to Ask Tony. This is where you, the listener, get to ask your model railroad questions to the editor of Model Railroad News, Tony Cook. Our first question comes to us from Bill Davis.
Tony, my name's Bill Davis. Intermountain had listed the GE U-18B as being in queue for production. The last time I looked at their website, it had been canceled. I really need one for the South Georgia short line. Thank you very much.
Well, Tony, what do you say to Bill, who's looking to add that locomotive to his roster?
We've seen a little bit of that on production runs in the last year. That, again, as we talked about that conditional announcement on those in-scale Bud RDCs, and I know Athearn had a couple of different freight car containers or something that, again, the orders weren't there, so they moved on to another project. And Intermountain, that run that he's talking about, I think was a September. It was right about after the NTS, I believe. Those were a September announcement for another run of the U-18Bs. That is such an awesome prototype. And I was so excited when I heard that question, because I love the baby U-boat. The U-18B came out from General Electric in 1973, has all the look of a U-boat, but shrunk down to about the length of a Jeep 9. And they didn't sell a whole, there's like maybe 125-ish produced. And that sounds like, oh, well, nope, they're almost all like it's Seaboard or Maine Central, and you're done. I think like Mississippi Export or Texas Utilities or somebody bought one, but no UP, no Conrail, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very limited piece. The first plastic one was about 50 years ago that Lionel tooled an HO scale one for their run at HO from 74 to 77. And then Intermountain brought out a real serious version of that. It was announced at the National Train Show in 2006. And the release on it, I believe it delivers in early 2009. So a couple, 2 or 3 years between runs. And I do remember they showed that early mock-up shell was like silver or white with the Intermountain logo stamped on the long hood, because I always wanted that one. Like, oh, that'd be cool. But it's been out a handful of times. There was another run in like 2015. I remember there are reviews of it in Model Railroad News at the end of 2015. And then they did the run I really like was a mid 2016 run, had some fantasy roads. They did Southern Pacific and like Peabody Coal and a couple others that, were not prototypes. in their fantasy livery, and the little SP one is really awesome looking. Now, this latest run, again, this is similar to our conversation we had with Shane Wilson about some of these really specific prototypes that have a limited, prototype looks. Again, as I said, you're basically talking Seaboard, Main Central, and a few secondhand owners that gets tougher and tougher to, when you put that call out there of, hey, we're going to make more of these, and well, is the interest there? I forget on the road names. There were several that were prototypes or patched. I think there was like a Seaboard Coastline patched out and a few other things, but I would guess, again, as happens, is the look on pre-orders from hobby dealers and distributors and things just was not substantial. And it shows canceled right now, but doesn't mean gone and forgotten, because obviously some work was done on the artwork and those kind of things. So, it may come back around. Intermountain does keep those kind of things listed on their website, and it will say canceled or looking for more reservations. I agree. I would love to see more. And if you're interested or don't know a lot on the little U18B, go out there and become a fan and find yourself a copy of the December 1991 mainline modeler, and then pick up the January 1992 mainline modeler. And publisher Robert Hunman did an article called U18B, the Baby Boat. And he's got drawings and pictures and roster information. And I think you too will become a convert. It's a great model layout piece because, again, it looks like a nice big GE U-boat, but is perfect for, 18 radius 4x8 track, which is probably one of the reasons why Lionel tooled it in the mid-70s. I had reached out to, but I've not gotten a response back from Intermountain, but please watch the Facebook page and I will put up information as I hear about it. But I would not say it's gone or that's a dead announcement. That, again, we've had a lot of supply issues in the last year with, the electronics and chips. Like Pico just delivered that Kraus MAFI, but the ones that have landed first are the standard DC because of chip shortages have kept the DCC sound coming a little bit slower. So that could be another factor. If there wasn't strong, reservations, they may have decided, well, with the supply we can get of electronics, maybe those would be better put in GEVOs or something else with a bigger audience. So it is unfortunate. It is frustrating. Again, vote with your dollars, or make sure when those things are announced to go in and put reservations. And I do see those little U-boats. He mentioned he wanted one for his railroad. They're out there. They pop up, eBay swap meets, those kind of things that, potentially maybe you could find one there, but we'll certainly keep an eye for announcements on it. And if I can get some hard information from Intermountain, I'll post that out on the Model Train Resource and Model Railroad News Facebook pages of kind of an update on those and other projects that have kind of been moved to the side track for the moment.
Yeah, that definitely comes back to the conversation we had earlier. The decisions that have to be made by these businesses, with their heart, their head, and their wallet. And again, a great point you made, Tony. When you see these things pop up, make sure you get your reservations in, because those are the key indicators they're obviously using to decide if they're actually going to produce it or not. So make sure you're showing the interest and letting them know, yes, I do want this. So thank you again, Tony, for all the research there to answer that question. To have your question answered on an upcoming episode of What's Happening in Model Railroading, go to aroundthelayout.com/Ask Tony. Follow the instructions there to leave your voice message. We'll select up to 2 questions each month, and yours just might be one that's heard and answered here on the show. So, Tony, it was great catching up with you, all the things that are happening in model railroading. We've got Amherst at the end of the month. I'm sure that's just going to just pile in all the new announcements and put you right to work for the upcoming issues of Model Railroad News.
Always does. That's always an exciting time.
And tell us where else we can find Tony Cook and all the projects that you're working on.
Yeah, shop.whiteriverproductions.com will get you to White River's website that you can see Model Railroad News there. You can buy back issues. You can subscribe. The White River app is available that you can look at all the various White River magazine titles, that you can download the free app. And I need to look at this closer. I said this someplace recently too, that I should be better educated. I think there's a setup on the app that it's almost like a Netflix style thing where you can subscribe for a certain amount of money, and you didn't just subscribe to Model Railroad News or Passenger Train Journal or Railroad Model Craftsman, but you can kind of look at like what's on the newsstand right now. And then there's also back issues available on titles like HO Collector. Quite a few of those have been out of print for a while. So if you suddenly discover, oh man, they did a story on this or that, oh, it's sold out. You can see those kind of things too. And I know the whole HO Collector back to 2017 is been digitized and is on the app. Not all the like Craftsman's, 80 years old. We don't have all the way back. Those are not available there, but like the last maybe 10 years, I think, are some of the things that you can find on some of the other magazines. But shop.whiteriverproductions.com. And then I have Model Train Resource on YouTube is what I've been focused on a lot lately. And I've been working on, I always say, hey, when I'm unboxing these and doing the photography work, why don't I have a camera set up to kind of give some first impressions, or here's what I found, or this was what comes in the box. And I've been doing those since sometime in November. And you'll see those. I've got some other videos. Like I say, I spoke briefly with David Elbach at Tangent on that one hopper. I'll be talking to Chris Brimley on those Thrall cars. Nick Molo at Moloko has got a bunch of great box cars, those Brainerd shops, Northern Pacific and Burlington Northern. And, I think he's in the New Zealand or Tasmania or someplace down under, and we're working the logistics of trying to do a quick talk and share a look at those. So I do some videos like that. My buddy Mike Ostertag and I looked at that first S-Scale hopper from ScaleTrains. So it's mostly just a quick 3-minute unboxing video. But as you look through this stuff, occasionally if there's something that I'll do a little bit longer video, but most of them, the idea is something short and just kind of give you the gist, as they say, and that's, what is that, GIST, the gist of things.
Learning new words as we go with gist, and we talked earlier with plosives, and so we've got a lot of great things happening in model railroading. Tony's on top of them, so glad we could have you here on Around the Layout with what's happening in model railroading to share them all. So again, thanks, Tony, and we'll look forward to talking to you next month.
Thanks, Ray. Have a great time at Amherst.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. Past episodes and more can be found on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.